Hi, I'm Taji and this is Melanie, and this is Simple Gourmet's Life-Changing Cooking Tips. Today we're talking about winter squash. Here are two of my favorites, butternut squash and spaghetti squash. Butternut squash is probably the one that you're most familiar with. Spaghetti squash is one of my favorites and one you might not be as familiar with, but is really easy to cook. So we're going to start with the butternut squash. The thing to know about buying butternut squash in the store is that you want to buy a small one with a long neck, because this is where all of your meat is. This is where the good stuff is. And the bottom is actually kind of hard to peel, a little hard to get at. So I'm going to show you how to peel, how to cut, and roast the butternut squash. The first thing that I do is cut off the top and the bottom. And then the second thing I do is cut between the neck and the body. And I'm going to work with each separate at a time. So first I'm going to work with my neck, which is again full of the meat. And I'm just going to take my knife and slice down and peel away the skin. You can use a serrated potato peeler for this, but I don't really recommend it because it kind of will dull your peeler, and this is just a lot faster and a lot easier. Once you're done, you've got just a nice block of the butternut squash. And at this point, we're going to cut it into more manageable pieces. So I'm going to take a small bit of it, cut it down the middle, put it down flat so it's easy to cut. And cut it into big chunks like this. And we're going to roast it. And what we're going to do is actually put it on some parchment paper on a baking sheet. So once you've got the neck all cut into large chunks, you've still got this piece to work with. And this is where all the seeds are. So I'm going to do two things. First, I'm going to just cut it in half. I'm going to leave the skin on because it's kind of hard to peel. We're going to bake it just like this. And then later, after it comes out of the oven, you can scoop out the meat really easily. But for now, I'm just going to scoop out the seeds. Just kind of like carving a pumpkin. Just use a spoon and get all the seeds out. Okay, now it's just a matter of putting some olive oil, salt, and pepper. Drizzle with olive oil, a nice pinch of salt, a little bit of pepper, and toss it together. Now you can buy butternut squash already cubed up like this in the store, but the problem is that it doesn't stay good very long. So sometimes you'll buy it and it will be a little wet looking in the bag, and by the time you get it home, it's a little bit slimy. So we don't recommend that, because really what can happen is you can't really wash off that slime, so then you've wasted all this money on a bag of pre-cut squash. So now you know how to cut it yourself, so you can do that. It's a lot easier, and you won't waste a bag of pre-cut butternut squash. So now we're going to put this in the oven at 400 degrees for about 20 minutes until it's golden and soft. So now we're going to talk about spaghetti squash. And the nice thing about spaghetti squash is that you don't have to peel it. It's actually really, really easy to cook. All you have to do is cut it in half. So start in the middle with a sharp knife and cut all the way through. Turn it around, do the same thing. And on the inside, all of these seeds, we're just going to cook it with the seeds in it and everything. So I'm going to put this just face down in a baking dish. I'm going to add a couple of cups of water. And then I'm going to put this in the oven as well, uncovered, for about 35 minutes at 400 degrees. So we've just taken the butternut squash out of the oven, and it looks fantastic. It's golden and it's tender, so it's ready to serve. So we're going to take our butternut squash chunks and just pile them on the plate. And our little halves that we have down here, they've cooked up nice and golden and tender as well. So you can serve this just as an individual serving if you'd like, or you can serve the chunks. And then the final touch that I like to add is just a little drizzle of maple syrup and just a pinch more salt and pepper, and it's ready to go. A little salt and a little pepper. Butternut squash. And then for our spaghetti squash, it's just come out of the oven as well. It's nice and hot. And the nice thing about the spaghetti squash is that at this point, it's actually very easy to get the seeds out. So what I'm first going to do is just scrape the seeds out really gently with a spoon and discard those off to the side. Then I'm going to take my squash, and I'm actually going to use a fork to get the flesh out. And now you'll see why it's called spaghetti squash. The whole piece just kind of shreds into these beautiful little strands. So it's kind of almost like a low-carb spaghetti. A lot of times you see recipes that have little strands of this butternut or this spaghetti squash with maybe tomato sauce on top or a little butter. So now I've got all the spaghetti squash in the dish, and I'm just going to season with a little bit of Parmesan cheese, drizzle of olive oil, a little salt, and a little pepper. And it's ready, spaghetti squash.